The observation deck was packed with tourists, scientists, and religious pilgrims, all pressing against the reinforced glass to stare at the thing floating in space. Jake Morrison stood at the back, arms crossed, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "It's just sitting there," he said to nobody in particular. His co-worker, a young woman named Becky from the maintenance crew, shot him a look. "Just sitting there? Jake, that's the Sentinel of Karvesh. It's over 500 meters long. It's been floating there for 1,300 years. It defended an entire alien civilization before going silent. Show some respect." Jake shrugged and took a sip from his coffee thermos. "I've seen bigger things break down. My cousin's tractor back in Nebraska is older than most of the equipment on this station, and that still runs." He squinted at the massive war machine through the window. "Though I gotta admit, the Karveshi knew how to build stuff that lasts." The Covenant station orbited what everyone called the Dead World, a planet that used to be home to millions of Karveshi people. Now it was just dust, radiation, and ruins. The only thing left was their greatest creation, the Sentinel, floating in eternal silence like a tombstone made of metal and mystery. Jake had arrived on the station 2 weeks ago as part of a human maintenance contract. The pay was decent, the food was terrible, and the artificial gravity made his knees ache. He'd signed up for 6 months of fixing broken air filters and recalibrating water recyclers, not standing around gawking at ancient alien history. "You know what drives me crazy?" Jake said, still staring at the Sentinel. "Everyone treats that thing like it's magic. Like it's beyond understanding. But at the end of the day it's just a machine. Machines break. Machines can be fixed." A tall alien with blue skin and too many arms turned around. This was Commander Thalvar, head of station security. "You speak with ignorance, human. The Sentinel has been studied for centuries. Thousands of the galaxy's finest engineers, scientists, and technicians have attempted to reactivate it. All have failed. The technology is beyond current understanding." "Beyond current understanding," Jake repeated, rolling the words around in his mouth like he was tasting them. "That's what my shop teacher used to say about the engine in his truck. Then I fixed it in an afternoon with a socket wrench and some common sense." Thalvar's face did something that might have been a frown. "Your arrogance is typical of your species. Not arrogance, buddy. Just experience." Jake set down his coffee and pulled out his portable scanner from his belt. It was a beat-up piece of equipment, held together with electrical tape and optimism. He'd bought it used from a salvage yard on Mars and had been using it for 7 years. He pointed it at the wall of the observation deck and watched the readings. Becky leaned over his shoulder. "What are you doing?" "Something weird," Jake muttered. "Feel that." "Feel what?" Jake pressed his palm flat against the metal wall. "There. You feel it? Like a vibration. Really faint." Becky touched the wall, then shook her head. "I don't feel anything. My scanner's picking it up. Harmonic frequency, 0.003 Hz. That's a feedback loop. Something's generating a resonance pattern and it's not stopping." He looked up at the Sentinel through the window. "And it's coming from that thing." On the other side of the observation deck, High Architect Valmis was giving a lecture to a group of young alien students. Valmis was one of the galaxy's leading experts on ancient technology, and he never let anyone forget it. His voice carried across the room, full of pompous authority. "The Sentinel represents the pinnacle of Karveshi engineering," Valmis announced. "Its power core operates on principles we have yet to fully comprehend. Its hull is composed of materials that resist our most advanced scanning equipment. For over a millennium, it has remained dormant, a mystery wrapped in legend." Jake snorted. "Mystery wrapped in legend. That's a fancy way of saying nobody's actually tried fixing it." Thalvar's multiple eyes all focused on Jake at once. "You dare suggest you could succeed where thousands have failed?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet. I'm just saying that vibration pattern? I've seen it before. Back on Titan we had a mining droid that seized up. Wouldn't move, wouldn't respond to commands. Everyone said it was fried. But I traced the problem to a stuck relay in the feedback system. Same vibration pattern. 0.003 Hz. "The Sentinel is not a mining droid," Valmis called out, apparently overhearing the conversation. He walked over, his robes sweeping dramatically behind him. "It is a sacred artifact. The tomb of a dead civilization. Your primitive tools and limited understanding are meaningless here." Jake looked at the alien scholar for a long moment. Then he looked back at his scanner. Then he looked at the Sentinel floating in space, silent and still and supposedly impossible to fix. "You know what?" Jake said, picking up his toolbox from where he'd set it on the floor. "I'm gonna go take a closer look." "Absolutely not," Thelvar said, stepping in front of him. Access to the Sentinel is restricted to authorized research personnel only. I'm maintenance. Maintenance goes everywhere. Jake sidestepped the commander and headed for the door. Becky hurried after him. Jake, you can't be serious. You'll get fired. Or arrested. Or both. Probably, Jake agreed cheerfully. But here's the thing, Beck. I've been listening to these people talk for 2 weeks. Everyone's got theories. Everyone's got explanations for why nobody can wake this thing up. But you know what nobody's actually done? What? Tried hitting it with a wrench. Valmus sputtered behind them. This is outrageous. Commander, stop him. But Jake was already in the corridor, following the signs toward the maintenance access tunnels. He'd studied the station layout his first day here, habit from years of working in places where knowing the back routes saved time. There was an access point that led directly to the Sentinel's docking cradle, used for external repairs and inspections. His radio crackled. Thelvar's voice came through, angry and official. Morrison, returned to the observation deck immediately. That is an order. Jake switched off his radio and kept walking. Because here's what Jake knew that all these fancy scientists and historians didn't seem to get. Machines weren't magic. They were built by someone, which meant they could be understood by someone else. Maybe not completely. Maybe not elegantly. But enough to get them working again. And that faint vibration he detected? That meant something inside the Sentinel was still active, still trying to complete some process but getting stuck in a loop. That wasn't a dead machine. That was a sleeping one. Jake reached the access tunnel, punched in the maintenance override code, and grabbed his toolbox tighter. All right, big guy, he muttered, looking through the tunnel toward the massive shape of the Sentinel in the distance. Let's see what you've got. Behind him he could hear running footsteps and shouting voices. Security was coming. He probably had 10 minutes, maybe 15 if he was lucky. Jake Morrison smiled. 15 minutes was plenty of time to hit something with a wrench. He climbed into the tunnel and didn't look back. Jake crawled through the maintenance tunnel for what felt like forever, his toolbox scraping against the metal floor behind him. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a human, which meant it was probably designed for those small robot drones that did most of the external maintenance work. His shoulders kept bumping the walls, and twice he had to stop and wiggle through narrower sections. Should have skipped that second breakfast burrito, he muttered to himself. The tunnel opened up into a small service bay attached directly to the Sentinel's outer hull. Jake pulled himself through and stood up, brushing dust off his maintenance coveralls. Through the small porthole window he could see stars and the curve of the dead world below. But right in front of him, taking up most of his view, was the hull of the Sentinel itself. Up close it was even more impressive. The metal, if it was metal, had a weird quality to it. It seemed to shift colors slightly depending on how the light hit it. There were patterns etched into the surface, flowing designs that might have been decorative or might have been functional. With alien tech you could never really tell. Jake pressed his hand against the hull. There was again that faint vibration. Stronger now that he was actually touching the thing. It felt almost alive, like putting your hand on a car engine that was trying to turn over but couldn't quite catch. He pulled out his scanner and started running diagnostics. The readings were all over the place, which usually meant interference from multiple sources. Power signatures, magnetic fields, some kind of exotic radiation he didn't even have a name for. But underneath all that noise there was a pattern. A rhythm. There you are, Jake said, following the vibration with his hand along the hull. He walked about 20 feet to the left, where the vibration felt strongest, and found what he was looking for. An access panel about 3 feet square, with symbols he couldn't read but a mechanism he recognized. Universal design principles meant that even alien engineers put important stuff behind access panels. The panel was sealed tight. Jake tried his multi-tool, but whatever locking mechanism the Karveshi had used wasn't responding to anything he tried. He sat back on his heels and thought about it. His radio crackled to life. He'd forgotten he turned it off. Becky's voice came through, worried. Jake, they're talking about sending a security team after you. Commander Thelvar is really angry. You need to come back before this gets worse. Jake keyed his radio. Beck, quick question. How much trouble am I already in? Like, arrested and deported back to Earth trouble. So basically maximum trouble. Pretty much, yeah. Then I might as well actually do something worth getting arrested for. Jake looked at the sealed panel. I'm gonna try something. If you hear alarms, that's probably me. Jake, don't. He switched off the radio again and pulled out his plasma cutter. It was technically against safety regulations to use one this close to an unknown power source, but Jake had stopped caring about regulations around the time they told him he couldn't fix things his own way. The cutter sliced through the seal like butter. The panel fell away and Jake caught it before it could float off into space. Inside was a maze of components that looked nothing like any technology he'd seen before. Crystalline structures, metallic threads that seemed to move on their own, and a central core that pulsed with a faint blue light. Okay, Jake said to himself. Okay, this is either gonna work or it's gonna kill me. Let's find out which. He spent the next 20 minutes tracing the vibration to its source. It led him through 3 more access panels and deeper into the Sentinel systems. The design was alien, sure, but the logic was still there. Power had to flow from somewhere to somewhere else. Information had to be processed and transmitted. Even across species and centuries, engineering was still engineering. He found the problem in what he figured was some kind of relay junction. A cluster of crystalline components that should have been conducting energy but weren't. They were covered in a thin film of something that his scanner identified as exotic particle residue. 1,300 years of floating in space near a radioactive planet had basically gummed up the works. Back on Titan, the mining droid had the same issue. Different cause, same result. The relay couldn't complete its sequence because there was interference in the feedback loop. The solution on Titan had been simple. Clean the contacts, reset the sequence, and give the whole thing a good whack to make sure everything seated properly. Jake didn't have cleaning solution for alien technology. He didn't have a reset switch because nothing was labeled. But he did have a wrench. The maintenance manual I never wrote would say this is a terrible idea, Jake said, positioning himself in front of the junction. But every mechanic knows the truth. Sometimes you just gotta percuss the maintenance. He studied the junction for a moment, identifying what he thought were the 3 main connection points. Then he pulled out his wrench, the same one his grandfather had given him when he was 16, and tapped the first point firmly. Nothing happened. He tapped the second point a little harder this time. Still nothing. 3rd time's the charm, Jake muttered, and brought the wrench down on the 3rd point with a solid clang that echoed through the service bay. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the entire Sentinel hummed. It was a deep sound, felt more than heard, vibrating through Jake's bones. The blue light in the crystalline core suddenly flared bright. All around him, systems that had been dark for over a millennium began to glow. Lights flickered on in sequence, running along the walls in patterns that looked almost like neural pathways firing. "Oh man," Jake whispered. "Oh man, it's actually working." The humming grew louder. Jake's scanner started screaming warnings at him, detecting massive power surges throughout the system. Through the porthole, he could see external lights on the Sentinel's hull flickering to life, hundreds of them, making the ancient war machine blaze like a constellation. Then just as suddenly as it started, everything went dark again. The humming faded. The lights died. The Sentinel fell silent once more. But it had been alive. For 3 full seconds, Jake had woken something that hadn't moved in 1,300 years. His radio exploded with noise. Multiple voices talking over each other, some shouting, some speaking in alien languages he didn't understand. He caught fragments from Becky, saw the lights, and, "What did you do?" Jake stared at the junction, his heart pounding. The residue on the crystalline components had been burned away by that brief surge of power. The relay was clean now. But something else was stopping the startup sequence from completing. He pulled out his multi-tool and connected it to one of the crystalline threads, not really sure if it would work. To his surprise, his tool's display lit up with symbols and diagrams. It was trying to interface with the Sentinel's systems. Text appeared on his screen. Not in English, not in any language he recognized, but somehow his tool was translating it. The words came through fragmented and glitchy, but readable. Warden 7. Systems. Online. Oh. You. Jake blinked at his screen. Then he looked around the service bay, half expecting to see someone else there. But he was alone. The Sentinel was talking to him. His hands shaking slightly, Jake typed on his multi-tool's tiny keyboard. "Name's Jake Morrison. I'm a mechanic. Are you okay in there?" The response came faster this time. "Paralyzed. 1,358 years. Could not move. Could not complete mission. Who are you to wake me?" Jake thought about how to answer that. He settled on the truth. "I'm just a guy who fixes things. And you looked like you needed fixing." There was a pause. Then, "Can you repair me completely?" "I can try." "What's wrong with you?" "Initialization matrix corrupted. Power core stable but locked. Weapons offline. Sensors limited. I have been conscious but trapped. Do you understand what that means?" Jake thought about being awake but unable to move or speak for 1,300 years. He thought about watching centuries pass through whatever sensors still worked, completely helpless and alone. Yeah, he typed. Yeah, I understand. That sounds like hell, buddy. Let's get you fixed up. Warning, the text on his screen flashed. The unraveling approaches. 3 systems away. I must be operational to warn the galaxy. The unraveling? What's that? But before Warden 7 could answer, Jake heard the sound of the airlock cycling behind him. Security had arrived. Jake looked at his screen one more time and typed quickly, I gotta go deal with some angry aliens. But I'm coming back. I promise. Don't go anywhere. I have not moved in 1,358 years. I will be here. Despite everything, Jake smiled. The ancient alien war machine had just made a joke. Things were looking up. Commander Thelvar came through the airlock with 4 security officers, all of them armed and looking very serious. Jake stood up slowly, hands visible, his wrench still in one hand and his multi-tool in the other. Before you arrest me, Jake said quickly, you should know that thing just talked to me. Thelvar's expression didn't change. You will return to the station immediately. Your contract is terminated. You will be confined to quarters until transport back to Earth can be arranged. Did you hear what I said? The Sentinel is awake. Well, partially awake. It's been conscious this whole time, just stuck. And it's got something important to tell us. One of the security officers, a stocky alien with gray skin, laughed. The human has gone insane from exposure to exotic radiation. We should get him to medical. I'm not insane. Jake held up his multi-tool, showing the screen. Look, it's right here. It calls itself Warden 7. It's been trying to warn people for over 1,000 years, but nobody could hear it until now. Thelvar took the multi-tool and examined the screen. His expression shifted from anger to confusion. This is impossible. The Sentinel's systems do not interface with primitive human technology. Yeah, well, apparently when you percuss the maintenance correctly, impossible gets a lot more possible. Jake pointed back toward the access panels. Something about the way I jump-started its systems created a bridge. My tool can translate what it's saying. Barely, but enough. More footsteps echoed in the airlock. High Architect Valmus pushed his way through, his robes billowing dramatically. Behind him came Becky and 2 other human maintenance workers, along with a crowd of scientists and officials who'd apparently heard about what happened. You have defiled a sacred monument, Valmus declared, pointing an accusing finger at Jake. You have violated every protocol, ignored every warning and woke up something that's been trying to talk to you for 1,300 years, Jake interrupted. Maybe instead of yelling at me you could ask it what it wants to say. Valmus sputtered. The Sentinel does not communicate. It is dormant. You caused a brief power fluctuation, nothing more. Jake's multi-tool chimed. Everyone looked at it. New text was scrolling across the screen. I am Warden 7, final guardian of the HFY people. I have waited for someone who could hear me. The mechanic Jake has provided that connection. You must listen. The unraveling returns. The service bay went completely silent. Valmus stared at the screen like it had personally insulted him. Thelvar's multiple eyes widened. The other aliens started murmuring to each other in various languages. Becky whispered, Jake, what's the unraveling? I don't know yet. I was about to ask when you guys showed up. Jake took back his multi-tool and typed, Warden 7, what is the unraveling? The response came immediately, the text appearing faster now as if Warden 7 was desperate to get the information out. The unraveling is extinction. It does not destroy civilizations. It erases them. It exists partially outside normal reality. It consumes matter, energy, information, memory. Everything it touches ceases to have ever existed. The HFY detected it approaching our system 1,358 years ago. They built me to fight it while they evacuated. Jake read the words out loud for everyone to hear. The murmuring grew louder. Some of the aliens looked scared. Others looked skeptical. This is a trick, Valmus insisted. Some kind of programmed message or a malfunction in the humans' primitive equipment. Jake typed, if they evacuated, what happened to them? The unraveling caught them before they could escape. I was placed on standby, waiting for their return signal. It never came. I remained here watching, waiting, screaming a warning that no one could hear. Until today. Why didn't you shut down? Jake typed. My final mission, detect the unraveling's return. Warn any civilizations that might arise after the HFY. I have been screaming for 1,358 years. You are the first to hear. Commander Thelvar stepped forward. Ask it when the unraveling will arrive. Jake typed the question. The answer made his blood run cold. It is already here. 3 systems away. Moving toward the galactic core. It will reach Covenant space in approximately 47 standard days. Every world in its path will cease to exist. The service bay erupted in chaos. Aliens were shouting, some running back toward the airlock, others pulling out communication devices to contact their governments. Valmis looked pale, all his arrogance gone. Thelvar was speaking rapidly into his radio, calling for emergency protocols. Jake just stood there, staring at his multi-tool screen. 47 days. Less than 2 months before something that erased entire civilizations reached populated space. Becky grabbed his arm. Jake, is this real? Could that thing be wrong? I don't think so, Jake said quietly. It's been waiting over 1,000 years to deliver this warning. It wouldn't lie. More text appeared. Mechanic Jake. You must repair me. I failed to stop the unraveling before. The Karveshi fought with logic and precision. Was not enough. But you woke me using methods I do not understand. Methods that should not work. Perhaps that is what is needed. Jake looked up at the massive hull of the Sentinel, thinking about what Warden 7 was really saying. The most advanced civilization in their time couldn't stop this thing. But maybe, just maybe, a mechanic from Detroit with a wrench and some duct tape could do something they couldn't. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of challenge that Jake had spent his whole life proving he could handle. He typed, "What do you need me to do?" Full system restoration. Power core unlock. Weapons activation. Sensors calibration. Neural matrix integration. And something the Karveshi never attempted. I need to learn to think like you. Like a human? Yes. The unraveling adapts to logical patterns. It consumes order and predictability. But your method of waking me was neither logical nor predictable. Teach me that. Teach me to be unpredictable. Teach me chaos. Jake felt a crazy smile spreading across his face. They wanted him to teach an ancient alien war machine to think like a human. To be random, creative, and just dumb enough to try the impossible. Now we're talking, he said out loud. Thelvar turned back to him. What did it say? It says I need to repair it completely. And then I need to teach it to fight dirty. Jake looked around at all the assembled aliens. I'm gonna need help. A lot of help. Parts, tools, people who aren't afraid to break some rules. This is madness, Valmis said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Even if the Sentinel can be restored, one ship cannot stop something that destroyed the Karveshi. Yeah, well, the Karveshi didn't have a human mechanic. Jake started walking toward the airlock. Warden 7, I'm coming back with supplies. Start showing me what systems need work. Acknowledged. Mechanic Jake, I must warn you. The repair process will be dangerous. The final integration will require direct neural connection. It may kill you. Jake paused. Becky was staring at him, horror on her face. Even Thelvar looked concerned. Jake typed back, yeah, but if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. At least this way we go down swinging. That's the human way. There was a pause. Then, I begin to understand why you could wake me. Your species is delightfully insane. You're damn right we are, Jake said. He looked at Thelvar. So, am I still under arrest or are we gonna save the galaxy? Commander Thelvar holstered his weapon. The Covenant Council must be informed immediately. But if what the Sentinel says is true, we have no time for debate. You will have your supplies, human. And whatever assistance we can provide. Valmis looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. I cannot believe I am saying this, but the primitive is correct. Desperate times require desperate measures. He straightened his robes. I will coordinate with the scientific teams. Someone must ensure you do not accidentally destroy us all while attempting to save us. Jake grinned. That's the spirit. Becky, round up the maintenance crew. We've got work to do. As everyone filed out of the service bay, Jake took one last look at the Sentinel's hull. Somewhere inside that massive machine, an intelligence that had been alone for over 1,000 years was finally not alone anymore. Hang tight, Warden, Jake whispered. Help's coming. On his multi-tool screen, one last message appeared. Thank you, Mechanic Jake. For the first time in 1,358 years, I have hope. The next 72 hours were absolute chaos, and Jake loved every minute of it. The Covenant Council had held an emergency session that lasted 6 hours. They debated, argued, consulted ancient protocols, and generally did what bureaucrats do best, talk without deciding anything. Meanwhile, Jake had already stripped half the station's backup generators and was waist-deep in the Sentinel's power core housing. Hand me the plasma welder, he called out to Becky, who was floating nearby in a zero-gravity work harness. She passed him the tool. You know Volmus is having a breakdown over what we're doing, right? He keeps saying we're butchering priceless technology. We're saving it, Jake corrected, applying the welder to a junction point. There's a difference. Warden, how's that feel? His multi-tool, now permanently strapped to his forearm, displayed Warden 7's response. Power flow increasing by 12%. Your methods are crude but effective. Crude but effective, that's gonna be my epitaph, Jake muttered. He pulled himself out of the access shaft and looked at the organized chaos around him. The service bay had been transformed into an impromptu workshop. Human maintenance workers mixed with young alien engineers, all of them working on different sections of the Sentinel simultaneously. There was Danny, a kid fresh out of technical school in Houston, rewiring sensor arrays with the help of a four-armed alien named Crix. Over by the weapon systems, Becky was supervising two other aliens as they tried to integrate a modern targeting computer with thousand-year-old firing mechanisms. It shouldn't work. By every law of physics and engineering, it was impossible. They were doing it anyway. Jake, someone called from across the bay. It was Tommy, one of the older human mechanics, a guy who'd spent 30 years fixing deep space mining equipment. We got a problem with the shield emitters. The power coupling doesn't match anything we've got. Jake pulled himself over using the guide cables they'd strung across the bay. He looked at the coupling Tommy was pointing to. Yeah, that's a problem. Warden, what did your people use for power transfer in these systems? Crystalline conduits grown specifically for each system. They cannot be replicated with current technology. Can't be replicated, Jake repeated. But can they be bypassed? Explain. Jake pointed to the shield emitter. What if we don't try to match your original system? What if we just run standard power cables directly to the emitter array and let our equipment handle the conversion? That would be inefficient. Power loss would be significant. But would it work? There was a pause. Then, yes, it would work. Inefficient is better than not working at all. Jake turned to Tommy. Strip the power cores from the escape pods. We're not gonna need them anyway. Tommy raised an eyebrow. That's gonna make Volmus even more angry. Volmus can file a complaint after we save his life. Jake pulled up a schematic on his multi-tool. Warden, show me what other systems need power rerouting. Over the next day they cannibalized everything they could get their hands on. The station's coffee maker, which used a miniature antimatter containment system, became part of the Sentinel's weapon stabilizers. The recreational area's holographic projector got torn apart for its quantum processors. Even the high-end medical scanner from the infirmary got repurposed into the sensor array. Commander Thelvar watched it all happen with a mixture of horror and fascination. Your species is destroying a space station to repair an ancient weapon. Not destroying, Jake said, not looking up from his work. Repurposing. There's a difference. The Council is receiving complaints from 17 different departments. Tell them they can have their stuff back after we deal with the unraveling. What amazed Jake most wasn't the work itself, but how quickly everyone had come together. The young alien engineers, the ones who'd been dismissed by their elders as too inexperienced, were some of the best workers he'd ever seen. They didn't care about protocols or proper procedures. They just wanted to get the job done. Crix, the four-armed engineer, turned out to have an incredible eye for detail. Danny taught him some human shortcuts and Crix taught Danny some alien techniques. Within hours they were working together like they'd been doing it for years. But the real breakthrough came on the third day, when Volmus finally stopped complaining and started helping. Jake was struggling with the neural interface system, trying to figure out how to create a connection between human brain patterns and Karveshi technology. Nothing was working. Every simulation failed. Every calculation came up impossible. Volmus approached with a data pad. I have been reviewing the Sentinel's original design specifications. The Karveshi did attempt neural integration, but only with their own biology. Your brain structure is completely different. Thanks for the update, Jake said tiredly. Real helpful. However, Volmus continued, I may have found a solution. The Karveshi neural matrix was designed to be adaptive. It learns from the user. If we bypass the species-specific initialization and force a direct connection, the matrix should, theoretically, adapt to your neural patterns. Jake looked at the data Volmus was showing him. Should, theoretically. What's the failure rate? Approximately 73% chance of severe neural damage or death. So about 1 in 4 chance I survive? Closer to 1 in 3 if we optimize the connection sequence. Jake thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. Let's do it. Becky grabbed his arm. Jake, no. Those odds are terrible. Those odds are better than what we've got if we don't try. He looked at her seriously. Beck, the unraveling is 38 days away now. If Warden 7 can't fight it properly, everyone on this station dies. Everyone on the nearby planets dies. Probably everyone in the sector dies. 1 in 3 chance is looking pretty good compared to 0 chance. He's right, Valmus admitted quietly. I find myself disturbed by agreeing with the human, but he is right. Warden 7's text appeared on Jake's screen. Mechanic Jake, I do not wish to cause your death. Perhaps there is another way. Jake typed back, you've been alone for 1300 years trying to protect people who couldn't hear you. I'm not letting you go through that again. We're doing this together. Your species confuses me. You make decisions that are statistically unwise. Yeah, we do that a lot. It's kind of our thing. They spent the next 12 hours preparing. Valmus designed the connection interface. Danny and Crix built the neural bridge using parts from 6 different systems that had no business working together. Becky ran simulations until her eyes were red from staring at screens. The entire station seemed to hold its breath. Jake sat in the chair they'd rigged up, surrounded by equipment that looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory. Cables ran from the chair to the Sentinel's neural matrix. Monitors displayed his brain activity, his heart rate, everything. Okay, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Let's go over this one more time. What happens when you flip the switch? Valmus checked his data pad. The neural bridge will activate. Your consciousness will be transmitted directly into the Sentinel's matrix. If the matrix accepts your patterns, integration will begin. If not, my brain turns to soup. Got it? Jake looked at Becky. If this goes bad, tell my mom I died doing something cool, not just fixing toilets in space. You're not going to die, Becky said, but her voice shook. Warden, Jake said out loud, knowing the AI could hear him through the sensors. You ready for this? No. But I have learned from watching you that being ready is not a requirement for attempting the impossible. Jake laughed. You're learning already. All right, Valmus. Fire it up. The High Architect's hand hesitated over the activation switch. For someone who'd spent days complaining about everything Jake did, he looked genuinely worried now. For what it's worth, human, your bravery is noted. Appreciate it. Now hit the button before I change my mind. Valmus activated the neural bridge. Jake's world exploded into light and sensation. He felt himself stretching, expanding, becoming more than just Jake Morrison from Detroit. He was suddenly aware of the Sentinel's entire structure, every system, every damaged component, every dormant weapon. It was overwhelming, too much information for one human brain to process. He felt Warden 7's presence, vast and ancient and desperately lonely. For a moment, they were separate entities trying to occupy the same space. Then, like 2 rivers merging, they began to flow together. Jake showed Warden 7 what it meant to be human. The irrationality, the stubbornness, the absolute refusal to give up even when math said you should. He showed the AI his memories of fixing things that couldn't be fixed, of finding solutions where none existed, of looking at the word impossible and reading it as a challenge. Warden 7 showed Jake what it meant to be a guardian. The absolute commitment to protecting others even at cost of self. The patience of waiting centuries for a purpose. The weight of responsibility for lives that depended on you. They weren't human and AI anymore. They were something new. Something that understood both logic and chaos, both precision and improvisation. Jake opened his eyes. Or maybe Warden 7 opened them. It was hard to tell the difference now. Did it work? Becky asked, her voice small and scared. Jake smiled. When he spoke, his voice had a strange harmonic quality to it, like 2 people talking in perfect sync. Yeah, Beck. It worked. We're operational. The unraveling arrived exactly when Warden 7 predicted it would, and nothing could have prepared the galaxy for what it looked like. Jake stood in the Sentinel's command center, which was less of a room and more of a space where his consciousness merged with the ship's systems. Through Warden 7's sensors he could see it approaching. It wasn't a ship or a creature or even a physical thing. It was a tear in reality itself, a wound in space that bled darkness and made his eyes hurt to look at. That's not possible, Commander Thelvar said from the Covenant station, his voice coming through the communication system. The entire Covenant fleet had retreated to a safe distance, which turned out to be about 3 systems away. Only the Sentinel remained, floating between the unraveling and the rest of civilization. It exists outside normal physics, Jake explained, his voice still carrying that weird double tone from the neural connection. It's like trying to fight a hole in the universe. Everything you shoot at it just stops existing. The Covenant had tried exactly that. 3 days ago, they'd sent their most powerful warship to test the Unraveling's defenses. The ship fired every weapon it had. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic rounds, even experimental gravitational weapons. Every single shot vanished the moment it got close to the Unraveling, like it had never been fired at all. Then the warship itself got too close. One moment it was there. The next moment, everyone forgot it had ever existed. The only reason Jake knew about it was because Warden 7 had been recording everything from a distance, and even those recordings were glitchy and wrong. "Warden," Jake said, talking to the AI that was now part of his mind, "the Karveshi fought this thing. What did they try?" Memories that weren't his own flooded through Jake's consciousness. He saw ancient battles, saw Karveshi ships firing weapons that bent space and time. He saw them try to seal the Unraveling, contain it, redirect it. Nothing worked. The Unraveling just adapted and kept coming. "They fought with precision and logic," Jake muttered. "Every attack was calculated, every strategy was mathematically perfect. And it failed," Warden 7's voice resonated in his head. "The Unraveling learns from order. It consumes predictability." Jake thought about his entire career as a mechanic. Every impossible fix, every time he'd solved a problem by doing something that shouldn't work but did anyway. He thought about hitting the Sentinel with a wrench when the galaxy's finest minds had failed with their fancy equipment. "So we don't give it order," Jake said slowly. "We give it chaos." He pulled up the weapons systems they jury-rigged over the past weeks. Nothing matched. Nothing was designed to work together. The shield array used power from escape pod reactors. The main cannon was built from a station coffee maker and a medical scanner. The targeting computer was running software that Danny had literally written in 3 days using duct tape logic and hope. It was a disaster of engineering. It violated every principle of good design. It was perfect. "Covenant Fleet, this is the Sentinel," Jake broadcast on all channels. "We're engaging the Unraveling. If this goes bad, it's been nice knowing you." "Wait," Valmus's voice came through, panicked. "You have no plan? No strategy?" "Oh, we've got a strategy," Jake said, gripping the controls that were both physical and mental at the same time. "We're gonna wing it." He pushed the Sentinel forward, accelerating toward the Unraveling at speeds that made the hull groan. Warden 7 fed him sensor data, combat calculations, threat assessments. Jake ignored most of it and relied on instinct. The Unraveling expanded as they approached, a vast nothing that swallowed light and matter. Jake could feel it trying to understand the Sentinel, trying to categorize and adapt to their attack patterns. "Here's the thing about humans," Jake said, talking to the Unraveling like it could hear him. "We don't have attack patterns." He fired the main cannon but not at the Unraveling. He fired at empty space 3 degrees to the left. The shot, which was supposed to be a coherent energy beam, came out as a chaotic burst of quantum uncertainty because the coffee maker antimatter system wasn't properly calibrated. The Unraveling shifted, adapting to defend against an attack that never came. Jake immediately fired again, this time at the Unraveling directly, but he used the secondary weapons which were built from completely different technology and shouldn't have been compatible with the firing sequence at all. The shot actually hit. A chunk of the Unraveling destabilized, flickering like a bad hologram. It worked. Becky's voice came through from the station, where she was monitoring everything. "Jake, it actually worked." "Don't sound so surprised," Jake muttered, already lining up the next shot. But the Unraveling was adapting, changing its structure to defend against the secondary weapons. So Jake didn't use the secondary weapons. He used the tertiary system that Tommy had built from spare parts and optimism. Then he used the shield emitters as weapons by overloading them and venting the energy forward. Then he just rammed the Sentinel straight into the Unraveling's edge while firing everything simultaneously. Nothing he did made sense. There was no pattern, no logic, no mathematical formula. It was pure improvisation, the kind of chaotic problem-solving that humans were famous for. The Unraveling couldn't adapt because there was nothing to adapt to. Every attack was different. Every strategy contradicted the last one. Jake fought like he fixed machines by trying random things until something worked and then immediately trying something else. "Warden, what you got?" Jake asked, dodging a tendril of unreality that tried to wrap around the Sentinel. "The Unraveling is destabilizing in 3 primary sectors," Warden 7 reported. "But it is attempting to adjust its defensive matrix." "Then let's not give it time to adjust." Jake pulled up the navigation controls. "How fast can we move?" "At maximum power, we can achieve 0.7 light speed for approximately 40 seconds before core overload." And if we overload the core on purpose? There was a pause. Then Warden 7 said, in a tone that might have been excitement, "That is the most illogical tactical decision I have processed in 1,358 years. I'll take that as a compliment. Let's do it." Jake redirected every ounce of power to the engines, including power from life support, weapons, shields, everything. The Sentinel accelerated straight toward the heart of the unraveling, moving so fast that space itself seemed to bend around them. "Jake, what are you doing?" Commander Thelvar demanded. "Something stupid," Jake called back. The unraveling tried to consume the Sentinel as it approached, tried to erase it from existence. But the ship was moving too fast, pumping out too much chaotic energy from its jury-rigged systems. The unraveling couldn't get a grip on something that contradicted itself so completely. Jake reached the center of the unraveling, that impossible point where reality broke down, and he did the last thing anyone expected. He stopped. Full reverse thrust. Every engine firing in the opposite direction. The Sentinel's hull screamed in protest. Several systems exploded. The power core started to melt down. And the unraveling, which had been preparing for them to pass through, suddenly found itself with a highly unstable, completely nonsensical alien war machine sitting in its center, pumping out massive amounts of contradictory energy. "Warden, on my mark, we vent everything," Jake said. "Every system, every power core, every weapon. All at once, no sequence, no coordination. Just pure chaos. This will destroy the Sentinel." "Yeah, probably. But will it work?" "I calculate a 34% chance of successfully destabilizing the unraveling." Jake laughed. "Warden buddy, those are the best odds we've had all day." Mark. They released everything. The Sentinel became a bomb of organized chaos, every system firing or exploding or venting simultaneously. It was beautiful and terrible and completely insane. The unraveling tried to adapt, tried to process what was happening, tried to consume or deflect or understand the attack. It failed. Because there was nothing to understand. It was just a human mechanic and an ancient AI doing the most human thing possible. Refusing to lose even when losing made more sense than winning. The unraveling collapsed. Not destroyed exactly, but forced back into stable quantum states, scattered across dimensions where it couldn't harm anyone. The tear in reality sealed itself. Jake's vision went dark. He felt the neural connection with Warden 7 flickering. The Sentinel was dying, torn apart by its own final attack. "We did it," he whispered. "We did," Warden 7 agreed. "Thank you, Mechanic Jake. For giving me purpose again. For teaching me chaos. Thank you for letting me help." Then everything went black. Jake woke up 3 days later in the station's medical bay. His head hurt. His entire body hurt. But he was alive, and according to the doctors, he'd make a full recovery. Becky was sitting next to his bed, and she looked like she'd been crying. "You idiot. You magnificent idiot. Did we win?" Jake asked. "The unraveling is gone. Scattered. The Covenant scientists say it won't reform for at least 10,000 years if ever." She squeezed his hand. "You saved everyone. Not just me." Warden 7. Jake trailed off. "Is the Sentinel?" "Heavily damaged but reparable. And Warden 7 is still there waiting for you." Becky smiled. "It says, and I quote, 'Tell the mechanic I survived. We have more impossible things to accomplish.'" Jake grinned, then winced because it hurt. "Damn right we do." 2 weeks later, Jake stood in front of the Sentinel, tools in hand, ready to start repairs. The Covenant had offered him every honor and title they could think of. He turned them all down and asked for one thing: permission to keep working with Warden 7. Commander Thelvar approached with a data pad. "We have detected 3 more ancient artifacts in nearby systems. All of them are considered inoperable." Jake took the data pad and looked at the specifications. Impossible technology. Centuries old. Beyond current understanding. He grabbed his wrench and grinned. "Hold my beer," he said.